My name is Kelly Fitzpatrick, and in this presentation I'm going to go over power in groups and leadership styles. I'm going to start off the presentation with a brief introduction on power in groups. I will then go into the 7 forms of power that exist in groups. Then I'll use a made-up scenario of A and B accounting firm to help illustrate some of these forms of power. Next, I'm going to show you 2 surveys where participants were asked to rate the importance of the forms of power, both currently and in the future. Next, I'll talk about the 3 main leadership styles, followed by which type of leadership style works best with the different forms of power. And I'll conclude the presentation with a brief summary of the main points. What is power? Power is the ability or official capacity to exercise control or authority. It is the force that gives one communicator the ability to influence another communicator to take an action which would not otherwise be taken. What is a team? A team is a group organized for work or activity. More specifically, a team is a group that is especially cohesive and efficient because of clear and inspiring goals, a results-driven structure, competent members, unified commitment, a collaborative climate, standards of excellence, external support and recognition, and principled leadership. Whether or not there is a designated leader, such as a supervisor, coach, or manager, who has formal authority, every member has the power to shape events. More than half a century ago, experts identified several forms of power that are usually possessed by one or more members of a group. And depending on how they are used, these forms of power can make or break a team's success. Listed here are the 7 forms of power. The first one is position power, which is the ability to influence that comes from the position one holds. This is based on position, and normally the higher the position, the more compliance the leader is able to get from followers. Because of the position one holds, it is considered in their right to call the shots and expect them to be followed. Next, we have coercive power, which is the ability to influence others that arises because one can impose punishment or unpleasant consequences. This is based on fear. The fear of being hurt, poorly treated, or dismissed is what forces people to follow a coercive leader, and failure to comply will lead to punishment. Next, we have reward power. This is the ability to influence that arises because one can induce desirable rewards. It is based on rewards, and people that go along with the leader believe that they will be rewarded with positive incentives, such as increased pay, promotion, or recognition. Next, we have connection power. This is the ability to influence that arises because of one's connections and associations inside and outside the organization. This is based on links with important people. It is based on the leader's ability to build networks with influential persons outside and inside the organization. With connection power, it is not what you know, but who you know. Next, we have expert power, which is a decision-making method in which a single person perceived as an expert makes a decision for the group. This is based on one's skills or knowledge. In order for expert power to exist, it must be coupled with respect for the knowledge, talent, and/or skill, along with the assumption that this expertise is valuable to followers. Next, we have referent power, which is the ability to influence because one is respected or liked by the group. This is based on personal traits. A leader high in referent power is generally liked and admired by others because of personality traits such as charm, charisma, and creativity. They command awe, respect, and loyalty. And lastly, we have information power, which is the ability to influence that arises because of one's access to otherwise obscure information. This is based on access to information and based on the leader's ability to get and give the information that is necessary or is perceived as valuable. Channeling or withholding information is an effective way for a leader with information power to control actions. Next, we have a scenario I made up about a fictitious accounting firm called A and B. The scenario is, at the A and B accounting firm, Emma works as a senior accountant and does various accounting work and auditing for clients. Emma reports directly to Dan, a manager at A and B. She is currently working late hours on the audit for one of her clients, the Jacksons. There's a knock at her office door and Dan enters. In the first example, Dan tells Emma to stop working on the Jackson file and start immediately working on the Patterson file, which he wants done by tomorrow. Dan offers no justification, but Emma complies. This is an example of a position power scenario. We often do things for the boss precisely because he or she holds that title. Dan is Emma's boss, so that position ensures his orders will be followed by Emma without question. In example number 2, the Patterson file requires complicated tax calculations. Emma goes to Don, who works in the tax department, for help on that section of the project. This is an example of an expert power scenario. Since Don works in the tax department and is qualified to do these type of calculations, his input would be considered expert. In the third example, Emma tells Don that if he helps her, she will put in a good word with Don's boss. This is an example of a reward power scenario. Don will be influenced to help Emma because of the reward she is offering. Conversely, if Emma had threatened to go to Don's boss and complain if he didn't help, that would be an example of coercive power. Don would be influenced to help to avoid the punishment. In the last example, Mike, a colleague, asks Emma if she could spend a little time looking over some of his work. Even though Emma is bogged down with finishing the Patterson file by the next day, she respects Mike and decides to help him. This is an example of a referent power scenario. Emma likes and respects Mike, so she is willing to help him out even though he's not her boss and she is not required to do so. Next, we have a survey where participants were asked to identify the extent to which they currently leverage the various sources of power at work on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being not at all and 5 being to a very great extent. The results can be seen in this chart. The top 3 most frequently leveraged sources of power are expert power, information power, and connection power, all rating about a 4 out of 5. In the middle are reward power and referent power, rating between a 3 and a 4, followed closely by position power. The least leveraged source of power is coercive power, or the power to punish others, which rated approximately a 2.5. This raises the question of why don't leaders use punishment power more frequently? Is it because it is rarely needed? Or is it because leaders are reluctant to use punishment because it is too draining and difficult to do so? In this next survey, we are looking ahead, and participants were asked, what are the 3 sources of power most critical for you to leverage in the next 5 years? 89% of participants reported that the power of relationships or connection power would be most important in the next 5 years, followed by information power with 57%. These results are illustrative of leadership in the age of networks. The advancement of technology has led to the development of vast and fast social and informational networks. Reward power ranked 3rd with 51%, followed by expert power with 48%. Listed here are the 3 main leadership styles. The first one is authoritarian, which is a leadership style in which the designated leader uses legitimate, coercive, and reward power to control members. An authoritarian leadership style approach uses power at their disposal to control members. Next, we have democratic, which is a leadership style in which the designated leader encourages members to share decision-making. Early research seemed to suggest that the democratic leadership style was the best, while contemporary studies show that's an oversimplification. It depends on the situation, and democratic leadership style tends to work better in non-stressful situations, while authoritarian leadership style is more productive in stressful situations. And lastly, we have laissez-faire, which is a leadership style in which the leader gives up power and transforms a group into a leaderless collection of equals. The laissez-faire leadership style consists of the leader letting the group take charge of all decisions and actions. Next, we have a chart. On the left-hand side listed are the 7 forms of power. They correspond with the right-hand side, which is the leadership style that best fits each form of power. When it comes to position, coercive, and reward power, the best type of leadership style to use to implement these power types is authoritarian. In order for position power to exist, the leader needs to be in a position of authority. In order to grant the rewards of reward power and carry out the punishments of coercive power, the leader needs to have the authority to do these things. Since an authoritarian leader has power at their disposal, they will use it to achieve and carry out their goals. Expert power and information power rely on a person's expertise or a person's ability to obtain certain information. They depend upon individual competence and qualities. The best type of leadership style to implement these power types would be the democratic style of leadership. Democratic leaders encourage members to share in decision-making. So if certain members have valuable input or expertise, sharing that information will be encouraged by a democratic leader. Referent power relies heavily on trust. A democratic or laissez-faire leadership style would work best for referent power. Democratic leaders ask for input from the group and share plans with the group. This establishes trust with the team, and thus the leader will be more respected by the members. Laissez-faire leaders allow the group to make decisions, which is also a way to establish trust. And finally, connection power relies on connections and associations with important people. Any type of leader can possess this form of power. It is not necessarily what you know, but who you know. For example, an authoritarian leader might insist on hiring his or her children into the company, while a democratic leader would ask for input from the group on whether or not their child should be hired. And a laissez-faire leader would leave the decision entirely up to the group. These are a few of the main points of the presentation. In conclusion, power is the ability to exercise control. Even though there may be a designated leader, each member of the group has the power to shape events. There are 7 forms of power, and they are position, coercive, reward, connection, expert, referent, and information power. Connection power, expert power, and information power are seen as the most important forms of power to possess, illustrating the importance of social and informational networks. Authoritarian leadership works best with position, coercive, reward, and connection power. Democratic leadership works best with expert, information, referent, and connection power. And finally, laissez-faire leadership works best with referent and connection power. Thank you.